Hi, everyone. Happy Saturday. Happy Sunday. All right. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. Tonight, we'll discuss Sino-US relations, and we have a guest joining us. Let me first give you an intro. Henry Kissinger died at age 100. Discussions about his complicated legacy has stirred up some of, I think, the most divisive debates. He's called a mass murderer by some, while revered as the most notable diplomat of the 20th century. One journalist called him a war criminal with a Nobel Peace Prize. And I think that title is the most succinct illustration of Kissinger's reputation. Despite the controversies, Henry Kissinger has influenced a generation of American elites and diplomats. He's gone, but his ideas and policies are still followed by American politicians today. Uh, the discussion of his legacy and mistakes and the lessons we should learn from them are only relevant in the context of current geopolitical crisis. Tonight's program, isn't so much about Kissinger, but rather it's about us and the direction our country and the rest of the world is heading. We want to answer the question, what can we learn from Kissinger's controversies to help us stay on the right course, navigating through complex geopolitical storms ahead? So tonight we'll first talk about how do the Chinese view Henry Kissinger, and then we'll talk about what made Kissinger misjudge the CCP. And then where does the Sino-US relations go from here? Joining my discussion tonight is Professor John Lee. Let me bring him on. Here we go.
Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
John. Hi.
Thank you, Lei, for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let me tell everyone a little bit about John. He's a professor of economics and accounting at City University of New York. Before coming to the US, he had worked for China's Ministry of Finance and International Trade and a large state-owned enterprise, Sinochem. He is also a participant of the 1989 pro-democracy student movement in Beijing and an eyewitness of what happened in Tiananmen Square. Welcome to my program, John. Now, before we start talking about Kissinger, I'm just curious. Were you a government official? Tell us a little bit about your first job in China.
It was kind of boring. I was at 25, so it's really not a life a youngster at that age would like to take. My daily
saying your
routine
job was boring. You weren't boring.
I wasn't boring. I try not to be boring, but we're always on guard when we have conversations. We deal with high-ranking officials. My daily routine was to ferry myself between my office building in the western suburb to the central leadership compound. And I had this pass that would give me access to the leadership compound immediately. That's quite a privilege. But then all I need to do is just to deliver some report that I had handwritten and typed up by the little, lowly secretaries. So it was boring. And that's primary reason I decided to leave the country eventually, for all the prestige or the aura of invincibility, whatever there was.
Okay. Well, can I ask, if you had stayed in China, would you be a high-ranking official by now that we would recognize your name somewhere?
I did dine. I did have meeting with the people at the vice premier level. So I was pretty close to the central leadership for the foreign policy. I even had numbers, statistics about how much what they call, uh, aviation petrol, which was, highly refined petrol or fuel that's used for military airplanes that China exported to North Korea.
Okay.
Then it was also an anecdote that's very, very amusing. When the then Chinese president visited Outer Mongolia, the sovereign country, he brought along with him as a gift several train cars of fuel because my country, Senecam, was specialized on a kind of trade.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he sent the oil to Mongolian, it was funny. The government didn't even have a warehouse to store those, cars of fuel. So the train couldn't move. The train had to stay there immobile on the track for experienced time because there was no housing capacity on the part of Mongolia to receive it.
I see. Well, I'm glad that you left China so that we are able to have this conversation. Had you stayed in China, I don't think we'll have a discussion like this tonight. So, so all right. So, well,
I'll be
welcome.
weeping for the loss or passing of Kissinger, probably.
All right. Okay, now let's talk about Henry Kissinger. During his lifetime, he visited China over 100 times, and the last time was this July. After he turned 100, Chinese leader Xi Jinping received him in the same room that Kissinger met China's then premier, Zhou Enlai, almost half a century ago. Xi Jinping also treated him to a lavish birthday dinner. I've seen the video. They explained the flower arrangement. It was a very lavish dinner. Although Beijing calls Kissinger the Chinese people's old friend, which is the official title of honor, many Chinese living outside China call him the CCP's old friend. Actually, I saw within mainland China, Chinese people openly discussed Kissinger's 6 organ transplant surgeries and questioned if his longevity was attributable to CCP's sponsored transplants. Even though we could never find the answer for that question,
Truth, yes.
I was just surprised that people were actually talking about that. And when he died, the Chinese community on X, formerly Twitter, was filled with voices of celebration that the era of the panda diplomacy is over. So, John, despite the heavy propaganda, why do you think some Chinese don't perceive Kissinger as a friend? And what issues or troubles do Chinese have with Kissinger or his legacy?
Let's recall at the time of his visit, the Chinese economy has been driven into the ground, literally, due to disruptions of the Cultural Revolution. Politically, the country has taken a suicidal approach of being antagonistic to both the Soviet Union and the US. Yes, that was the truth. So I couldn't contain my laugh when I saw some commentaries, I read some commentaries recently that the reason for the rapprochement between US and China, the first trip to China was due to their desire to pull China out of Soviet Union's orbit. That was laughable if you have any history knowledge. So there was actually a skirmish along the Sino-US border in Heilongjiang in 1969.
You mean Sino-Russia border?
A Sino-Russia or Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Yes. And the Soviets, let's call it Soviets, even proposed to the US a nuclear surgical attack on China, which was rejected by the US. And people like us who were born into that period were typically malnourished because avoiding hunger would be your first mission of the day. And you would witness quite a few physical upheavals, like sending all the youth to the countryside. So if there is a time when the US has the absolute upper hand in forcing some real political reforms or transformations, the early 1970s should be one of them. Considering that Chiang Kai-shek, Mao's lifetime nemesis, was still alive and in control, and the national government in Taiwan, not the People's Republic as we know it, represents China at the United Nations. So if the economic calamity on a magnitude of the Cultural Revolution had persisted, Mao's rivals within the regime could challenge him in a fashion similar to those in Eastern Europe. And Taiwan would weigh in. That could spell the end of communist ruling in China. So Dr. Kissinger built up his reputation largely for being the person to reopen China. However, now the lovely panda, as you mentioned, has morphed into a bristling arch rival in the West. And so his legacy should be carefully reassessed.
Okay, thank you. But so you're saying that if if history can be recreated, I mean, the time it would, if the U.S., can can redo, can if we can travel back in time, if the U.S. take a different approach, the so-called Taiwan issue today or the Taiwan crisis today would be long gone, would be long solved if China underwent real political reforms. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, speaking of his influence, he was the first person who brought censorship to Hollywood because the 1997 James Bond movie Tomorrow Never Dies was originally set during the transfer of Hong Kong from British to China, with a plot that someone tried to destroy Hong Kong rather than handing it over to the Chinese. But according to the movie director, this plot line was dropped when Kissinger, who was a consultant, warned against the plot for fear that something like that may happen. I don't know why he thought that, but that's what his fear was. And this led to a last minute rewrite. So he's smart. Kissinger is smart and well educated, and he's referred to as Dr. Kissinger, and he belongs to the class of politicians who are called scholar practitioners. So what made the Harvard-trained political scientist misjudge the CCP? And not just once, but repeatedly.
I think this is really a very profound good question. Unfortunately, misjudging history is not an entitlement exclusive to Dr. Kissinger. Even among individuals from the hallowed halls of Harvard. I'll give you another example. Francis Fukuyama's history is over argument, made right after or in the wake of the fall of Berlin Wall, led to misguided American post-Cold War foreign policy for many years. However, Kissinger's legacy does persist without comprehensive assessment and potentially could result in more serious repercussions if left unaddressed. The question of why Harvard-trained elites consistently fall into historical traps deserve a dedicated discussion for deeper understanding. We may discuss it in a separate program. I think one key factor is their readiness to overthrow traditional framework, paradigm, and the value system, sometimes merely to display intellectual prowess. So there is certain element of mischievousness to it, because we are the lowly, unwashed mass, and they're up there. This is done without sufficient consideration for the enduring reasons behind these established systems. There got to be good reason for why this system, those paradigms have sustained the human race for so long over the centuries. Secondly,
so can I ask a question? So you think this
Sure.
Very Western critical thinking, the Western style of critical thinking, provided
neoliberalism, yes,
provided the framework to challenge everything, including our traditional values and beliefs that made that's the foundation of what America is. Is that what?
Yes. This country was built upon Protestant beliefs. This is a Christian country in its origin, so they question the basic tenets of Bible as a starter, and then they question all the values that we have taken as given, even marriage unions, even, I don't know, I have to be careful because you have pronounced, you have given away my identity. I don't want to have, a horde of students outside of my office.
but isn't that a problem in itself? I said that you have already left China. If you are a government official, then you will be in trouble for having this talk with me. Now that you are living in America, you shouldn't be. So that
I
itself.
used to live in a dark house. Used to live in a dark house. I've been totally changed. I would not imagine myself having this conversation 30 or 40 years ago before I left to China. My point is there is certain element of mischievousness about it. We just want to show off. But then there are also certain elements of a necessity. I studied engineering at undergraduate and then moved on to study other things. So I call myself a jack of a trade, master of none. This could be something that is a little bit, you know, argumentative, but I think overall, people who study science and engineer tend to have a more intense mental faculty. So these people also they probably are insecure. They're very good at the language or certain skill set, but they lack a very intense capability of thinking. So they draw conclusions easily. Also, it's easier for them to make a name for themselves. I'll give you an example. If you take a look at the list of the colleges on the scandals radar screen, you remember there was a group of super wealthy parents who through odious means to send their kids to elite colleges. I think
Hollywood
that
movie
list,
stars, there was
Hollywood
yeah.
stars and politicians, that list is the most reliable list of overrated schools. If you take a look at them, Harvard is one of them. And there are no Georgetowns, there are no Caltechs, no Carnegie Mellons, because those undeserving kids could survive at those places. It's a Chinese view, okay? It's quite different.
Yeah, I think that's
American view.
Yes, that's
These people they have ambitions. They could have been persecuted, as in the case of Kissinger. They really want to do something about it, but then they couldn't do well in science and engineering, and they couldn't become Einstein. So becoming somebody who can change the world in other means would be their goal, and pursuing politics or diplomacy could be a shortcut. That's, of course, my speculation.
okay. Well,
Sorry.
I appreciate your being so honest with you, because I may have a different view from you, because I run into so many Chinese parents who believe that their children should study science and engineering, and they think people who study liberal arts aren't very smart. But that's
Chinese parents.
The many Chinese parents hold that view. They think smart kids learn engineering, they learn physics, science, and then the not so smart kids learn liberal arts, philosophy. But in this world, in the Western world, it doesn't. Somehow, it's liberal arts education is part of the Western culture. Yeah.
Probably that's by pipe view.
Yeah. No, that's I think we could have
mainland.
a separate discussion on that.
Right.
All right. So we said now Henry Kissinger himself he was born in Germany, right? So he's German. He was German. And now was it you or someone told me that he was the one who introduced this what did you call that?
European style thinking?
Machiavellian style, the end justifies the means type of approach to politics. What's that word?
Yeah, we're in the territory of a throttle sound of BMW. He was a Bavarian, so you're hearing the BMW sound. That's how he speaks English, the gravel sound.
Okay.
And then, of course, I had a lot of admiration for him. I read through his treatise on China, and you have to come away impressed with this guy's erudition and knowledge. There were things I didn't know. I think I'm above average historian about Chinese, China's past, but he definitely knew more than me. And the thing is, he was, I would say, formed or influenced by these European thinking before he came to the United States. As far back as his Harvard years, his dissertation topic was about the intrigues, calculations, conspiracies of European noblemen or royal family like Castlereagh and Metternich, who he thought was instrumental in maintaining the balance of power on the continent. So he came with this kind of foreign, in the United States, he brought the United States this kind of foreign concept, mentality that that elite could somehow keep the stability of the country or international relations, which was a far cry from the founding principle of this country, which believe in individual freedom, fairness, and justice. I think that was a line we need to draw between Kissinger's legacy and the traditional heritage of this country.
Okay. All right. What about the criticism of the lack of principle? So he is known as the master of deals, right? He has made many deals with authoritarian regimes, and so this and CCP is the party that practices the, like I said, the Machiavellian belief the end justifies the means to the extreme. Like CCP would do anything to achieve its goal at any cost by breaking every rule.
First of all, I feel sorry, Lei. You have to be there and make odd pronunciations of these even odder words. Machiavellian. Then real. What is that word? Realpolitik.
You corrected my pronunciation today.
Realpolitik.
Oh, I can't.
Realpolitik.
Realpolitik.
And then there is d'état. Who could pronounce d'état? And who could pronounce rapprochement? Hey, stop. Okay. Coming down from pedestal, the elite. We don't speak that kind of language. So they just want to show they're different. Show me how you can solve the differential equation. And don't mislead me with those big words, which means nothing, but kowtowing to dictatorship. So I want to use. You're done? Yeah, I know your question.
No. You did fine. You don't even need me to ask you a question. Keep going. I'm amused. Keep going.
Towards you sincerely. How could you manage that job if you have to deal with these kind of, the damn liberals? They brought in all those funny words. I think China until now has become a major accomplishment. There is no mention of Kissinger without, in the same sentence, some kind of mentioning of China or trip to China, the reopening to Red China. And it was motivated, of course, by forging an alliance against the Soviet Union. And but Kissinger, for his erudition knowledge about China, which I have mentioned, never realized that communist China has always been a fiercer ideological opponent. So I guess he should have known it, but he decided he could trample on the principles to bring about some temporary relief, benefits, or even personal gains. As a Harvard-trained political scientist, he should have known that the Soviet Union invaded Hungary in 1956, and the reason for such invasion, as historical records reviewed, largely stem from the more fundamentalist intransigence of Chinese communists. This is little-known history. People thought Khrushchev made a decision, but actually the decision was made by Mao and his cohort. So the truth is that the invasion could never have happened without a constant cajoling, pushing, and threats from the Communist Party, whose leader Mao at that time saw himself as a replacement for Stalin in power, which, as turned out, was the real reason behind the split up of the two communist titans. So Mao and his cohorts, including Liu Shaoqi and even Deng Xiaoping himself, applied pressure and forced Khrushchev to invade and quell the pro-democracy government led by Nagy. And the CCP premier Zhou Enlai was the first to visit Hungary to show support for the invasion with the presence of Soviet tanks in sight wherever he was. So all this makes sense when you compare the different ways the two communist regimes in China and Russia or Soviet Union handled mass protests. One was the notorious massacre in Tiananmen Square, which I witnessed, and one in 1991 when the Soviet troops withdrew and the beaming Yeltsin climbed onto a tank to announce his arrival in post-Soviet Russia. So how Kissinger could misjudge on such a crucial matter is totally beyond me. I think the only reason I can come up with for such a smart man, he just didn't care. He didn't care, China has become arch rival of the United States. He didn't care that we could have to go to war with Red China over the Taiwan issue. So a rising authoritarian China has become a more formidable rival than the Soviet Union at any time in its 70-year existence. Even more lamentable is that people still heap praises on Kissinger for his China trip. I can easily see why the CCP does it, why they're mourning his passing, the loss of an old friend. But for us overseas Chinese who really want a free, prosperous China, that sentiment sounds funny.
Yeah. If you look at what, the role CCP played in 1958 during the Hungarian Revolution, like how they 1956, and how they were, in the back trying to get former USSR, to they were the instigator behind the scene. I mean, that theme has been repeated over and over until look at the Russia-Ukraine war.
Take a look at Hamas. Khrushchev was pushing back. Khrushchev didn't want it.
Yeah.
They sent Liu Shaoqi there from visit. They applied the pressure because Khrushchev didn't want to be dethroned.
Yeah.
But Stalin was around more. Mao could settle it that, he was the junior partner. But when Stalin was gone, Khrushchev's position was under threat from Mao. So eventually he decided that he had to do something. So Soviet was reluctant in making that decision.
Right. So I will say, Kissinger misjudged, or Kissinger and the people with him misjudged the CCP, the role CCP played in 1956, right, in Europe. But the U.S. diplomatic circles kept making the same mistake over and over until all the way until now in Russia, Ukraine, in the current conflict, in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel. I mean, they have underestimated the role, the schemes that the CCP has played behind those regional, quote unquote, regional conflicts. So you see how the same mistake has been repeated over and over again. So we ask the question: do you think we should be concerned about the so many American politicians are still following the so-called Kissinger legacy nowadays?
Yeah, his only legacy should be a total denial of any legacy, because it's so toxic. It represents a deviation from American heritage, from the tradition, from our exceptionalism, triumphalism. It forces us to stooge down to the level of banana republic, to negotiate, to dance with the wolves, those odious dictators. Because you are playing the same game as those dictators. You don't have belief. The signal you're sending out is inconsistent. And because of it, there is no credibility. Before Kissinger, whatever American says is whatever that's going to happen. But now that has become questionable. So not only have I made a lot of enemies, we have made a lot of old friends to become our new enemies. There are many instances of this. There was,
we've turned friends away.
Yes, you turn friend away. And Obama drew a red line that says, okay, you should never cross it. And you send a warning to Syria. But when Syria crossed it, There was no consequence.
Mm.
And how Americans treat the Turks, treat the Kurds in Iraq, that have all been very deplorable because they didn't see human rights, they didn't see justice as a central cornerstone of their foreign policy. And Kissinger and Nixon might start it. Their duplicity may not be confined to the Watergate, but also in the international dimension. To orchestrate the meetings between Kissinger and Zhou Enlai for the planning of the eventual meeting of Mao and Nixon, uh, they actually rely so much on the intermediary, who is the dictator in Pakistan at the time, General Khan. I think I couldn't pronounce his name well. We Chinese call it Chia Hak Khan, who died in a plane crash.
Mm.
If you read any history about Bangladesh,
Mm-hmm.
there was a huge bloodshed that happened that year on the magnitude of any genocide perpetrated by this general. But you would not be able to see it easily here in the press report because Nixon and Kissinger suppressed it. There was an infamous uh, blood telegram. The blood actually was the name of the diplomat based in Bengalese, nowadays Bangladesh at that time. General Khan took attack on the local people, resulting not millions, but hundreds of millions, hundreds of thousands of losses. But the news was suppressed by Kissinger and Nixon strategically just to appease the general so that he could continue working and serving as an intermediary. As it turned out, what happened was Kissinger made a visit to Pakistan and then called a sick leave. So he disappeared, vanished from the face of the earth for a few days on the pretext of sickness. What happened actually was he made a trip to China during the time and meet with Zhou Enlai. All was, helped, assisted, planned by that general, just to, help the general in power and to sort of reciprocate his goodwill. Nixon and Kissinger withheld this news from the American public for many years.
Okay, I I want to tell my viewers something. The day before Kissinger passed away, another billionaire that the Chinese love also passed away. I don't know if people are aware. It's Charles Munger. Is it Munger or Munger? I think it's Munger. Warren
probably.
Buffett's partner. Who died at age 99. And the CCP also calls him an old friend. So here I want to share, here we go. Here's some slides. Oh, sorry. Oh, what happened? Oh, sorry. No, wrong slides. I don't have, anyway, this is the wrong deck.
I just did Google search. Lay your right is a Munger.
It's Munger. Okay.
It's
All right. Good. Thank you. So basically he has been at the annual shareholder meeting this year, Munger used 3 consecutive words stupid to describe the exacerbated tensions between the United States and China. And he said that the US should get along with the CCP and engage in a lot of free trade with China for the common good. And the CCP has used many of his quotes to for publicity. So now, at the passing of people say the passing of these 2 world-renowned
celebrities.
billionaires, yeah, indicates an end to the end to an era. When Kissinger visited China in July, Xi Jinping said this to Kissinger. He said, "We won't forget our old friend, the US-China relations will forever be joined with the name Henry Kissinger. Now, Chinese leaders are very superstitious, right? They are very careful with what they say. But now that Kissinger has died, people are saying, well, should we expect Sino-US relations, to get into a dead end too, as Xi Jinping's words suggested, right? So do you think Xi Jinping has prophetically predicted where Sino-US relations is heading? Sorry, let me get rid of this slide.
He does have more information than I do. So definitely there will be some value attached to his prophecy. I think I've read dozens, if not hundreds, of commentaries on Kissinger's passing because I want to do research to find out what would be his legacy. I think, first of all, people now label him as a controversial. That means his integrity was not unquestionable. I couldn't imagine how the reaction would be 20 years ago. At that time, there could be a state funeral or whatever. So I think we could discuss about this later, but I think now there have been a bipartisan consent of China's threat. No one can question China's rise and the potential rivalry with the United States. Economically, it is called delinking. The government has implemented the policy to be detached from the Chinese economy and stop the infusion of capital and its theft of intellectual property. I guess it's have become a common view, and we're going to see this issue popping up again prominently in next year's presidential election. I guess Xi Jinping has felt the gravity of the issue too and tried to do something about it, as evidenced in his recent trip where he hobnobbed with the CEOs. But I guess it's probably too late because under his ruling, China's saber-rattling, China's belligerence towards Taiwan and hostility toward the West has been self-evident. So I don't think they have been turning back. The time of panda diplomacy is over. Xi Jinping offered to return the pandas they took away earlier this year. It's all symbolic. It's just unbelievably coincidental and also symbolic. That's almost also the end of Kissinger's life. So I think with the passing of Kissinger, the whole chapter is closed, and we have to move on in a new Sino-US era.
Okay. Well, that ends our discussion. We're open for questions. So we have a question from Jeff Ramos with a super chat. Thank you, Jeff. Here's a question to John. John, I'll read you the question.
Sure.
Says to John, are we in a pseudo Cold War with China versus US? Okay. Are we in a pseudo Cold War with China? It's China versus US. And if yes, did it start after the Clinton administration?
I think we are in a semi or quasi-similar mode. The only difference is in the former Cold War era, the two economies, Soviet Union and the United States, were totally detached. But here, the two economies have become intertwined, which makes the decoupling or delinking all the more difficult than in the past. But on a political front and military front, America has bluntly called China nemesis. So I don't think that's a problem. As for your second question, when did the Cold War start? I don't think it started with the Clinton era. I think Clinton era represented one of the honeymoon period of the two countries.
Yes.
And then you give the Chinese Communist regime another big gift, following the biggest gift ever, probably comparable to Xi Jinping, which is to grant China admission to World Trade Organization, which single-handedly made China the powerhouse economics that we saw today. So I definitely don't think it started then. Clinton was actually a very much a figure similar to Kissinger in getting money, in getting influence, peddling with Chinese government.
So when do you think it started?
So the Cold War, I think, started with the Trump administration. I think it was Trump who realized the threat of China, and I really have to give credit to Trump's unusual thinking because I think that was 2015 or 2016, uh, before Trump came onto the landscape, onto the political scene for presidential run. No one was talking about China. No one was talking about immigration matters, which of course was separate. But then he made China an issue uh, for presidential debate, and suddenly everybody realized China could pose a threat. China had stolen a lot of jobs. And then also very significant, equally significant, was his appointment of some real China hands, not those people who are academics, who can write verbosely and profusely about the matter, but who had lived in China, like Mao's Yu Maochun, who really knew China. Yes, I'll be very open about it. People like me who live there.
You look like Miles Yu a little bit.
Oh, thank you. I don't know whether it's a compliment or not. I think I'm still handsome. I'm probably more handsome than him. He came earlier, and so his ancestral tombs supposedly has to be dug out in China because he knew how to contain those damn communists.
Yeah.
In his words. So you really need people not graduating from Harvard, but from China's ghetto city or
People like you and me?
Yeah, yeah, to talk about China. Okay, or you can just teach English high school. I don't mind. So because you misread the country, and we Chinese had a sort of instruction from ancestors that peoples of letters could bring chaos. Now, I understand your stance could be different, but we really give these people a lot of power. We put them on pedestal. We listen to their words like gospel, but their consequences could be huge.
Mm. Okay, here's a question I'm just picking from Nick Fury. It's a question to both you and I. Is CCP's policy revolving around the psyche of redemption from Century of Humiliations? I think that's a book, Century of Humiliations. Does this narrative still rhyme with China's populace? Is US the bogeyman, bogeyman,
Bogeyman.
bogeyman for the Chinese?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll have you answer because I
didn't read that book. I think yes, I kind of understand what they say. I think it's a common tactic employed by any dictatorship. So I think
like what
it's very
tactic?
much true.
Can you specify?
Here, I think it won't relate to us, Lei and me, because we were brought up in the Deng Xiaoping era when China really opened up. And I grew up watching American movies on the film, American soap operas. But what you said was, yes, I knew
did not.
Michael Jordan, well, then maybe. I think I kept up pretty much with the cultural trends of America at that time in the early 80s. What he was portraying was the generation after us, was the post-Tiananmen Square generation, who was completely brainwashed, who believing American being a bogeyman, who believing the narrative communists had given them that America want to contain China's rise. And Xi Jinping gave up this narrative officially this time at his visit. He said, there's room for both of us, your country and us. But the younger generation believing it, that American didn't mean well. I think this psychological tactic will continue. But more and more, Chinese people are coming to the sense that this isn't the truth. If they read history at all, America probably has been the biggest benefactor or the country that have shown uh, most goodwill during different historical periods in China.
Mm. I have some questions. One question is, do you think Henry Kissinger was paid to make his last visit in July by the CCP?
I believe so. I believe money is always his motivating factor because essentially he's opportunist. I don't think he believes in anything. That's why all those commentators have become pressed to come up with a label for him. Eventually, they can only settle for the man who really believes in what is that word? Realpolitik. Yes, that's
Real,
intrigue.
yeah.
Machiavellian. He didn't believe in anything other than money. For people like him, money is probably the ultimate motivating factor. And at his age, he still traveled to China to become the double centenarian, that is age of 100, and have made 100 trips to China, was no small task. Imagine the hours of trip. And this guy really believed what money can bring about, including power.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here's another question. It's a super question from Jeff Ramos to John. What can you tell us about the United Front? The CCP
I understand.
United
Uh,
Front work. If they have
yeah,
any
统一
info,
战线，统一战线。
yeah. If you have any info for us, and loving the presentation. So my audience loves you. So and-
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, unified front. That was three of the tried and trusted tactics used by Chinese Communist Party. I was assistant person. Hey, I used to be one of them, so I
you were
knew
you
one
were
of the
one
tricks.
you were part of
I
the
was one
United
of
Front.
them. Yeah, the party official, of course. I knew the tricks. Unified front was most effective. Of course, what are the others? I give you a quiz. You should study it if you're a student in Chinese school. What are others?
What are the
群
other
众路
two?
线、统一战线. Brainwashing the masses would be another tactic.
那党
Unified
的
front.
建设，党的建设 party
Yes,
construction,
founding construction. Hey,
right?
we're all good students. You're all good
Okay.
students.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but unified front.
Wait. We need to we need to paraphrase that for my audience. So CCP has three magic weapons. Okay, John and I just
Yes.
went over them. The first one is United Front work, right? The second one was I said the party construction, meaning you have to build a party unit in every organization. What was the third, John?
It's called
党的领导.
no 群众路线.
Oh, 群众路线,
You
the
know,
mass
safeguard.
movement.
That's brainwashing the masses.
Brainwashing the masses or
Yeah,
the
yeah. 群众路线.
the
Yeah,
grassroots
yes. Basically, yeah.
manipulation. Right.
Grassroots work.
So these are
Grassroots
the
work.
CCP's magic weapons
Yeah.
to take over the world. We need to, the Western society need to study that. Should develop countermeasures against each one of those magic weapons.
Well,
Anyways,
just
go ahead.
imagine when CCP started its fighting to get power from the Kuomintang nationalist government. The number was in thousands. And Kuomintang was a well-recognized government with support from the West, was resourceful, but in as less as fewer than 20 years, they lost power to these thousands of people. And the magic power they had was the three lines we just quoted to you. So unified front was one very effective weapon they had, and it is well utilized, deployed in the West. So, like you, I could be watched by some people. Like you, the people who could report, uh, I'm a family in China, but I don't care. I think I'm doing the thing I think I should do. Thank you. Thank you for a compliment, and thank you for encouraging word.
Okay. All right. I want to say, let me see. Any questions from people? Okay. Unconventional Ideas had asked a question.
I like the name.
Yes. Henry Kissinger used the CCP to collapse the Soviet Union. While relations with the CCP remained too cordial for too long, do you think that was wise? Do you still think that was wise?
No, I think I've made it very clear, and I even questioned the premise. CCP imploded. Soviet Union imploded, and it was Reagan who took a totally different approach. He went back to the tradition, to the heritage, the value system of America. Remember, who defined the United States as a shining city on a hill. But Kissinger is the guy who's turning off the light of that shining city. So I don't think he would have bring about the collapse of the Soviet Union if he continued his political trajectory.
Okay, here's someone with a question. Well, first of all, someone made a comment. Ptolomeo Salamanca said, "This episode is very informative. I really enjoyed it." Well, thank you. Thank you, John. Now, question from Richard W. to John. Are BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the BRICS country, are they emerging economies or the Belt and Road a threat to the US or the world? I'm trying to understand the question. Are BRICS emerging economies or the...
It's a league. They formed some kind of alliance. They call themselves BRICS.
Yeah.
I think they have expanded their membership. And the Belt and Road Initiative was, of course, Xi's brainchild, master stroke. I think they have been hyped activities engaged in by the Chinese government to sort of forge some kind of alliance against the West, particularly the United States. I don't think they have been productive. I think this is very much indicative of a negative sentiment permeating in the West, in the U.S. academic or press. They try to hype up on things that were actually not significant. To my knowledge, Belt and Way has cost the Chinese government tons of money, billions of dollars, to no avail. And the developing countries, they were trying to reach out and assist, were not happy at all because they have been fallen into the trap of debts. BRICS, I think, are very visible in rhetoric, but there have been little cohesion to the so-called alliance because they were all underdeveloped countries. There have been little economic exchange, but the China's unilateral transfer of capital and the money. So I don't think it's a sustainable and a feasible threat in any way to the Western alliance like NATO.
Yeah, even in rhetorics, they are not as coherent now. Because
no.
Right, I mean, even the rhetorics, they're going their separate ways. And okay, here's let me see questions. All right, now John, I have a question. I'm curious. As you were talking, I'm wondering, where did you get your British accent?
Well, I started out very young, and I studied a program called Lingaphone at age 8. And it's funny, I used the gramophone. As the British speak, gramophone recorder, and I have to cover the windows with heavy curtains because at that time it was a taboo to study English. Yes, I was privileged. Our province only had 2 copies of the textbook, and by age 10, I memorized all the passages of that textbook. I tried to mimic the accent. And I, at that time, was living in a frontier province, Qinghai. So I could, yes, it's very far away.
It's remote, like in a remote area.
Flyover country. The only advantage that afforded to me was the reception quality of shortwave radio.
It's good?
I was a very early fan, yes, of BBC, along with Radio Moscow. Radio Moscow was good too.
What, Radio Moscow?
Radio Moscow Chinese broadcast.
Okay.
BBC was very great because they broadcast from India at that time,
Did
and
you
it's not
listen
too
to
far from India.
did
Yeah,
you
I
listen
listened
to
to
Re-
BBC.
did you listen
Yes.
to Voice of America?
No, I couldn't receive Voice America. It was jammed. It's a long story. My father got this shortwave radio as a prize during the 1950s. So at that time, the first thing you need to do is to bring it. If for any kind of shortwave radio to go to the public security, they're going to weld off most of the channels, including BBC. But they will leave open Radio Moscow. But BBC was only because it was broadcasting or relayed from India. And due to proximity to India, I was living in Qinghai. It's on Qinghai, Tibetan Plateau, Qinghai. Yeah, so I could receive the signal. That's why I fall in love with the accent, and I retained to this day this accent. Funny, it was my teacher, an English teacher, during my graduate days, was the interpreter, translator of Nixon's visit. And he loved my accent. He said, I tried to mimic American accent during class. He said, don't do that. Just go back to your basic.
Yeah, that's very
it's a
good.
funny accident.
Because when we learned English in China, we all learned British English. I remember when I learned English, my teacher commented on my British accent, and I lost it. I lost it. I can't even say it, but I just
You
admire.
lost it, Wellesley. Sorry.
Oh, you gave too much information of me.
Oh
Stop
no,
doing that.
yeah, I know, yeah, okay. Information age, and you are a mini celebrity now.
No,
I love your
please.
programs. Yes, I am really, I am
You're giving away too much
thankful.
information about me. All right.
No,
Okay, let's see. Let's to see if people have any questions. Tell Mr. Lee his accent is charming. From my helper, Sumiland.
I
All
don't
right.
know. I have an accident. Yes, okay.
Okay.
It's just
Also,
my
okay, and then another from Galia, say, does John also gets Russian with all these radio tricks? Do you yeah, do you speak a little Russian?
well, maybe a little bit, maybe not. Yeah, I did. No, I don't think so. I don't think I've ever picked up Russian. Yes, that's probably some misconception of people about the accent I have. But
Okay.
Russian, I never heard of it.
Okay. All right, here's a question from Moonwalker for John. Could you give us your predictions with US-China relations over the next 10 years? Will it decay?
I think, like I said, there's no turning back of delinking or decoupling. And this has become a consensus of the political elite of this country. Of course, we're going to see more discussion or debate about this issue, but I believe there will be no controversy about it. It's just about intensity of the argument against, working with China or being China's business partner. So in 10 years, I believe, I really hate to say this, but I think there could be transformative change occurring in the interim in the next 10 years. I don't think Xi's ruling is monolithic as it appears to be. I think there are undercurrents uh, of political changes. My friend and I discussed this over the Thanksgiving holiday period because we had a lot of party and consume a lot of turkey. Hopefully, we will become
Eat
known as
turkey for
summer.
Thanksgiving?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
good, good.
So of course, this has become a popular topic because I would compare today's China to the 1970s. She, of course, would assume the position taken by Mao. So if you look at that time period, Mao had iron grip on the whole country, but in as short as 6 years, he was gone, and his wife was put into jail. So I think there was rivaling groups who are probably heaping praises on Xi, but has different plans. So we don't know.
Mm. John, my view on the Sino-US relations going forward is, excuse me, I think it's beyond the control of Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. I think it's on a downward trajectory that neither of them can stop. The starting point of this downward trajectory is or was the spy balloon incident. I think because at the time the two were still trying to repair the relations, and they were trying to hold, for Anthony Blinken to go to China, but the balloon came from nowhere and kind of changed everything. So I feel like um, it's happening in a way that's against their will. So it's beyond repair now.
I don't think so. Sorry, with all due respect, I think Bloom is only a little blip on the radar screen. It doesn't have any geopolitical real influence. It's something American intelligence community has known for long. I guess they're sending some, device to wiretap or do any surveillance. I think the downward spiral you have described could be the norm, but with assumptions, with very bold assumptions. Remember, ahead of Xi's recent visit, hordes of CEO in the hundreds, including all the big names, went to Hong Kong for a conference to strengthen the ties, economic ties between the two countries. And at the meeting recently held between Xi and Biden, CEOs were invited, and they gave him a standing ovation.
You mean in San Francisco?
Those CEOs, of course, they were politically sensitive. They understood the current climate of Sino-US relations didn't allow them to speak out, defend China publicly, but that didn't mean they would stop sending money, jobs to China. I didn't see that happening. They're doing one thing, saying one thing in public forum, but doing something differently. As far as economic ties are maintained in today's fashion, then the question would remain as how the political ties will continue. That's a big caveat of your prediction. Sorry, I'm very bold. Go back to you.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, people are commenting on your accent. They love your accent, the British accent. Okay, so let me see. We could have some. I'm just trying to see what questions people have for you. From XJ Carroll.
Am I a big fan of Downton Abbey? Yes, I am.
Okay.
I love the accent.
Okay. Thank you for your wonderful and candid information and analysis. Tell us how you protect yourselves against CCP retribution within the US.
That's a big question. A little bit sad. Of course, hopefully, I've already become a public figure. To my knowledge, the authoritarian regime will always think twice before we do anything to a public figure. That's why I come out. I've written penned editorial pieces in newspapers, sometimes with the alias name. But I think I still believe in this country and believe in this country's principle. Given all that I have said, I believe I'm safe. I believe America will protect me. America has been a sanctuary for my voices and for my safety. I think it will continue to be such a haven and continue to be the shining city on the hill. And to make it continue, I will willing to do anything, to make any sacrifice.
Well, you said it beautifully, John. I don't need to say anything. But I think what John said is right. The safest way is to be outspoken. Now, once you are a public figure, then they will have to think twice if they do something to you. The least secure way is to stay in the shadow, be fearful all day long, and worry about what they would do to you or your families in China. I think this is, being outspoken is actually the safest way. So, well, thank you, John, for coming to my show and stating that. Let's see if there's any questions left. Okay, one last question. This is one last question from Ptolomeo Salamanca. Lei and John, what would be the best way for the United States to decouple with the PRC? That's a big question.
It's a
We
big
could do.
question, but it's a little bit of fraud for me because I've thought about it. I've already answered for it. You guys should know there was a special Taiwan Act, which was really a thorn in the side of CCP, passed by President Reagan. I should call on you, every one of you in the audience who are listening or watching, to write to your congressman to pass a special China Act that limits the presence of CCP in this country, limits Wall Street's power to do business with the CCP, and limit our diplomatic corps, including the former colleagues of Kissinger, to curry favor with the CCP at the expense of a country's interests and value. That's my answer.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, thank you, John. There's so many praises for you online, and I thank you for joining me and taking your time away from your family over the weekend. I think we had a great conversation. I hope to have you back some other time and to continue this dialogue.
Sure, my pleasure. Anytime.
All right.
Anytime.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and have a great evening or have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye. Bye, John.
Bye bye.
Bye.